Welcome everybody. Seid begrüßt in Yiddish. Seid begrüßt. Welcome. My name is Miri Coral, and I'm the director of the California Institute for Yiddish Culture and Language. And this is part of our showcase of contemporary Yiddish culture. And it's wonderful to see some long-term supporters and new supporters, new friends. And I also want to extend a special welcome to a few guests. And one of them is the Vice Consul of Japan, the Consulate General of Japan, Ms. Noriko Toyoda. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Is Mr. Kubaniwa here? Yes, Mr. Kubaniwa, welcome. He's a Japanese newspaper. I may mispronounce this as well. Yomiuri News, that's correct. Wonderful. And Ms. Tomomi Kanimaru, sorry, Tomomi, is the editor of the Japanese paper The Sun. So wonderful, welcome. Also, Ms. Hana Yamamoto with the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So we have a lovely Japanese contingent, and I'm not sure who walked in, but Ms. Aso, or is this Ms. Hayashi who just walked in? Which one? Which one? Hayashi, okay. So Ms. Hayashi, who is a former student of Professor Hirose. So welcome, yes, to obviously in America. Feels great. So I'm going to keep my own remarks very brief because of the time constraint, but you'll probably be very happy about that anyway. So those of you who don't know, who are with us for maybe the first time, or haven't been with us for a long time, the California Institute for Yiddish Culture and Language already has a 20-year history here in Los Angeles. We have been producing many innovative programs with the aim of keeping Yiddish culture vibrant, alive in the consciousness of everyone, Jews and non-Jews alike, to make sure that this heritage is respected, is loved, and is passed on to the next generation in some form or other. So this is part of our showcase of contemporary Yiddish culture. We do virtually monthly events. We are the most active Yiddish cultural organization west of New York City. So, so good that you're here. We can't do this without you. We're planning this year's showcase already. This is the time to be planning. So we have a few things already lined up. In November, a talk about the role of music in Yiddish film. In spring, we'll have a special guest from Israel doing a one-woman show called My Father's Daughter. We'll also have a vocal ensemble from the Bay Area, the Jewish Music and Poetry Project, doing like Shostakovich's cycle of Yiddish songs. So really should be wonderful. So there are so many aspects of Yiddish culture, and we make it our mission to try to showcase as much as we can, as much diversity about the culture as we can. But one aspect that American Jews especially have always been very proud of is the contribution of Yiddish humor to American mainstream humor. And of course, you only have to think of the TV series Seinfeld. You have to think of Jerry Lewis, Sid Caesar, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, etc., etc. So a huge impact of Yiddish humor on American mainstream culture. And while anyone can learn a foreign language, and even its crazy idioms, one of the most impossible tasks is to translate humor across cultures. So Japanese and Yiddish cultures have much in common. Our love of tradition, of learning, centrality of family. But without knowing too much, I have to say that our sensibilities with regards to humor are very different. So it takes a kind of genius who has familiarity with both cultures and who has a great sense of humor himself to even attempt to translate the pithy humor of Yiddish for a Japanese audience. And what do I mean by pithy? Well, you'll hear a little bit about that from our special speaker. So it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker and my friend, Professor Yoshiji Hirose. He is the chairman of the English department at Notre Dame Seishin University in Okayama, Japan. He received his PhD in American literature from Kansai University in 2000. He received 2 masters, one from Kansai University in Japan in English literature and one from the University of Washington in comparative literature. And he also received a diploma from the University of Oxford in Jewish studies. And in 2008, he was visiting professor at Brooklyn College in the Jewish Studies department. His awards include the 1998 Malamud Society of Japan Prize for Academic Achievements. And his recently published books include Verliebt in Jiddischer Sprach und der Jiddischer Welt, In Love with Yiddish Language and the Yiddish World, which is now in its 3rd edition, and in May was ranked number 2 on Amazon Japanese sellers. Isn't that amazing? Number 2. And even now, out of hundreds of thousands of books, it's like, a 3rd down. So that's pretty amazing for this book. So it shows you, and we can boost it. You have to read Japanese though, but yes. But it shows you a little bit about the interest in Yiddish among Japanese. His other books include A Yiddish Tradition and Innovation in Modern Jewish American Writers, The History and Present of American Jewish Literature, The Shadows of Yiddish on Modern American Jewish Writers, and The Symbolic Meaning of Yiddish. And this is just a little interesting note. His first name, Yoshiji, Yoshi, means goodness. So it's my great honor to introduce Professor Hirose, and you'll have to give me a moment to fumble with microphones.
Hello everybody, thank you very much for coming today. And today's time is quite limited, so let me start. Okay, I'm Yoshiji Hirose, as kindly merely introduced. When I was a graduate school student 40 years ago, one of my professors assigned Solar Bellows a dictum for us to read. He also introduced Leo Rosten's The Joys of Yiddish. And he explained how important it is to understand the religious and social background of the particular Yiddish expressions, such as Shemil, Shirmazel, Dibuk, Mishugana, Mensch, and Goishakot. At the time, I was astonished at all these strange words. I could not even dream about translating Rosten's book into Japanese in the future. As they say, man plans and God laughs. Their men struck and God laughed. I started my teaching career as a scholar of English literature, in particular Victorian literature. It is not an exaggeration to say that my fates changed when I discovered Yiddish, a little-known language in Japan. About 30 years ago, I went to Oxford to study not Victorian literature, but Yiddish and Yiddish literature with Dr. David Katz. and Dr. Gennady Streich, a culinary professor of New York University, and Dr. Mikhail Krutko, culinary professor of University of Michigan. All of them are admirable professors, and each of them is a real mensch. Dr. Katz, one of the top scholars of Yiddish, looks just like an Hagrid from Harry Potter, a big man with wild hair who guides the protagonist into the world of magic. And similarly, Dr. Katz led me to the world of Yiddish. Over the years, I have met extraordinary people. In 2000, I attended a Holocaust conference held in London, and I could talk with many Holocaust survivors, including Elie Wiesel, Nobel laureate. Using my limited Yiddish at the time, I was fortunate to be introduced to Mrs. Boschak, a Holocaust survivor from Boston, Massachusetts. 2 years later, in 2002, I was invited to her house, where I could see her large collection of Holocaust materials. Regina was born in Paris in 1925, the first child of a Polish Jewish father and Hungarian Jewish mother. Her tragedy took place all of a sudden on July 16, 1942, when a roundup of Jews organized by the French gendarmes came knocking on the door of her house at 5 in the morning. She and her parents were ordered to get dressed and go to the police station to verify their papers. Her younger brother was away on a Boy Scout trip and managed to escape the roundup. They were sent to the camp in Drancy outside Paris with other Jews. Most of the Jews there were alien Jews from outside France. Like Regina's parents, Regina was French because she was born in Paris, not in Poland. It was this fact that led to Regina's release after her mother interceded with camp authorities. During the war, Regina and her brother hid in the woods with her aunt, but her parents were sent to Auschwitz concentration camp and murdered. On October 15, 1947, Regina and her brother were able to immigrate to the United States, but the scars of the Holocaust were slow to heal. Even after over a half century, she still kept the menu of the ship Queen Elizabeth, in which they had sailed as refugees to America, the Promised Land. One more item that she kept as a precious memento is a ballpoint pen with a picture of Queen Elizabeth. While looking at these items, I was overwhelmed by her unique experiences and hardships which she had suffered. On the evening prior to my departure, after staying a week with Regina and Edgar Boschak, a famous lawyer, Regina came to my room and offered to give me the special menu and a ballpoint pen. And she said, Yoshi, you have spent many years studying Yiddish, my parents' Mama Russian, and Jewish history. You understand better what these things mean to me than my children. You deserve these gifts. I hesitated to accept them. Regina insisted. Upon accepting them, I felt very strongly that I would be more dedicated than ever to the study of Jewish history and Yiddish culture. Regina is still my Yiddish mama. In my heart, I have learned a lot from her about the Jewish cultural legacy, Yiddish Neshume, soul, and some funny Yiddish expressions such as, next please. Yes. Lessons understood years ago, right? Little pop in the head. I think most of you understand this. And may you grow like an onion with your head in the ground. Still, it's not clear to most Japanese, what does it mean. Okay. On the evening, My study of Yiddish has also given me an extraordinary opportunities. In the summer of 2004, in response to an invitation from Vivian Felsen, a famous Yiddish translator, I traveled to Toronto, Canada, and gave a lecture in Yiddish to the Jewish community there. Thanks to an announcement in a local newspaper, over 100 people attended. I was very nervous before my speech because I surmised that more than half the audience were Jews whose mother tongue was Yiddish. More than that, I realized by their age that some of the attendees were Holocaust survivors. Me, a Japanese, giving a talk in Yiddish to 20 Jews. Oy vey! When the hall was full, Mrs. Felsen introduced me in Yiddish. It was now too late to back out. My lecture was about the work of Isaac Bashevis Singer and the concept of the outsider. My lecture emphasized the symbolic meaning of Yiddish and its importance in Jewish American literature. I completed my talk with the help and the patience of the audience. I was concerned that people would find my approach a little too philosophical. But when I heard the loud applause, it allayed my fears and I felt relieved. Before my talk, Mrs. Felsen was worried about me. However, when it was over, she was full of praise and said, "It was great," with a big smile on her face. Her husband, a medical doctor, Shim Felsen, who had been listening in the front row, added smilingly, "Your lecture was great and very intriguing, though I could not understand it well." But the audience certainly seems to have loved it. In 2016, Vivian translated The Vale of Tears, Rabbi Pinchas Hirschsprung's memoir about his escape from Nazi-occupied Europe. Hirschsprung's Yiddish von nazischen Methode, Zichronis von der Polit, was first published in 1944. In this book, the Japanese Schindler, Chunesi Haren, and Tetsuzo Kotsuji were referred to as Japanese rescuers during the Holocaust at the risk of their own lives. For her translation of this work, Felsen received the J.I. Segal Award in 2018. The question then is, what led me, a Japanese goy with a Goyshe cop, to be here in front of you? In 1968, Leo Rosten published the epoch-making The Joys of Yiddish, and it has been recognized by many scholars of American literature as a great dictionary of Jewish humor. The Joys of Yiddish shows a key role of Yiddish in so much American literature, as Leo Rosten explains about The Joys of Yiddish. Quote, "This is a book about language, more particularly the English language. It shows how our marvelously resilient tongue has been influenced by another parlance, Yiddish. It illustrates how beautifully a language reflects the variety and vitality of life itself, and how the special culture of the Jews, their distinctive style of thought, their subtleties of feeling are reflected in Yiddish, and how this in turn has enhanced and enriched the English we use today." End quote. Rosten's preface was the reason why we American literature professors decided to translate the New Joys of Yiddish into Japanese. Without understanding their distinctive style of thought and their subtleties of feeling reflected in English, we Japanese scholars cannot delve into the depths of Jewish American literature. While reading Jewish American literature, we often encounter words and expressions derived from Yiddish in the work of Jewish American writers. Whenever we face these originally Yiddish or Hebrew expressions, we were frustrated and helpless. This is where I come in. We have my Japanese friends here, so that could you move on to the next one? Next one, please. This is an example of very powerful expressions of Yiddish. Shemil, and Shemazel, Meshuga, Dibuk, Mensch, Goishe Kopf, Sofko Sof, Oive. Okay, this is a Japanese translation, so that I think Japanese audience can get some nuance of these interesting expressions in Yiddish. Okay. In 2001, the 19 members of the Jewish Literary Society of Japan started translating Leo Rosten's The New Joys of Yiddish, revised by Lawrence Bush, which spent over 10 years to complete the Japanese translation. Somebody told us that Yoshiji to continue the translation for over 10 years. But anyways, to be honest with you, at times I did not think we could finish. When we did, the publisher did not show much interest, but gradually he understood how significant the translation would be for the future of Japanese American literature studies. So he said, I have to admire your 10-year efforts, and I have to commend you for your cultural contribution. And finally, Sofko Sof, a 533-page volume, was published in 2013, and the translation was, thanks to God, God's Duncan, warmly received by many Japanese scholars of American literature. And these are original The Joys of Yiddish, and these are Japanische Übersetzung. Okay? So it took us over 10 years. The hardest part of the translation was how to transpose the Jewish humor into a colloquial and appropriate Japanese expression that could evoke a similar sense of comicality in Japanese. The reason why Japanese have difficulty understanding Jewish humor are, first, we lack any education in Jewish history. Second, there is no deep knowledge about the pogroms and the Holocaust. Third, Jewish holidays and religious observance are not known to most Japanese. We are familiar with some Christian holidays like Christmas and Easter, but not Hanukkah or Passover. Next, please. And fourth, Japanese have almost no experience of assimilation programs. We are not concerned about our identities or our land, simply because most of us were born and raised in Japan. Our migration is still limited to small numbers of people. Fifth, monotheism is falling to Japanese polytheism, and it is hard to understand the concept of a singular God. These are reasons why we cannot understand that. Reason 1 to 4 could be remedied through education. However, number 5 is not easy to remedy because our spiritual sensibility is deeply rooted in our psyche. As most Japanese do not have the concept of Adonai or God. We can neither feel it nor give up our ingrained religious feelings toward polytheism or worship of nature, which is filled with many gods or spirits. Once we started our translating project, we realized we had to bridge the huge difference in religion, culture, and history between Japanese and Jewish people, as most Japanese don't share the customs of reading the Bible with the Jews or Christians. We know nothing about Jewish holidays, such as Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Purim, and Pesach. The only world history we learn at school is all from Christian perspective, except for the history of the Holocaust. It is my great pleasure to know that Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, based on the Shraga Friedman's translation of the musical was produced in the United States, produced by National Yiddish Theater, Volksbühne, and directed by Joel Gray, Fiddler auf dem Dach, moved to stage 42 of Broadway in February 2019, and was nominated for 4 Lucille Lortel Awards for Best Revival, Director, Lead Actor, and Famous Featured Actress. Lisa Fishman, who plays Grandma Title, explains about the Yiddish production of the Fiddler on the Louvre. This is Japanese version. This is a universal story. It has a theme that humans have been dealing with since the beginning of time and keep repeating over and over. We are all connected to each other in one human family. We have to move forward from this us versus them mentality and start learning to live together. Wonderful message I want to give to your person. As she says, it goes without saying that we Japanese also share the sense of one human family with the Jewish people. In fact, Fiddler on the Louvre is very popular and has been performed over 900 times in Japan by Japanese actors and actresses since 1967. The strong relationship between the father and his daughters and Tevye's strong sense of tradition are very similar with that of the image of traditional Japanese fathers. Due to the cultural resonances, even now, many Japanese believe that the Fiddler on the Louvre was originally written by a Japanese. We can say, incredible though it may seem, that there are cultural linkages between Japanese and Jewish ethics, as we see in one of the 10 commandments, honor thy father and thy mother. We Japanese make much of this ethics as a basis of relation between parents and children. As a child, I was taught at school and at home that it is a grave sin to talk back to one's teachers or parents. There are also cultural similarities, as we see in the following Yiddish proverbs. Next, please. Okay. Little Yiddish here. Gegeben hat Adonai den Menschen, gegeben 2 Eulen, mitten einmal. Kedei soll mehr hören und weniger reden. So you see. Okay, therefore Adonai gave man 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that he would listen more and speak less. Okay? This saying illustrates deeply held Jewish beliefs and attitudes, and we can find similar sayings in Japanese. Kuchi wa wazawai no moto. Okay? Means a mouth causes trouble. Therefore, it goes without saying that we have some important similarities as well as obvious differences. The challenge of our translation of the new Joys of Yiddish was to search for such similarities and cultural equivalence between Yiddish and Japanese. There is an example in Rosten's humorous book about King Hore. Okay? No evil eye, no good wood. Okay? One excerpt, one quotation. A Jewish patriarch was on the witness stand in the United States. How old are you? Asked the Wasp district attorney. I'm King Hore, 81. Just answer the question, said the DA sharply. Nothing else. Now, how old are you? King Hore, 81, said the old man. Now the judge said, the witness will answer the question, and only the question, without additional comment, or be held in contempt of court. Up rose the counsel for the defense. Your Honor, may I ask the question? He turned to the old man. King Hori, how old are you? Says the old man, 81. Okay, an exact Japanese counterpart of King Hori is kuwabara kuwabara. Okay? Which means absent omen or God help me. But in this context, okage samade, which means thanks to you or gods or Buddha is better fit. Therefore, some Yiddish expressions are not always difficult to translate into Japanese. This is one example of common cultural value that is often useful in translation. Of course, there are many problematic examples. In the introduction of her book, No Joke, Making Jewish Humor, Bruce Weiss, former professor at Harvard University, related a story about 4 Europeans hiking together who got terribly lost. First they run out of food, then water. I'm so thirsty, says the Englishman, I must have tea. I'm so thirsty, says the Frenchman, I must have wine. I'm so thirsty, says the German, I must have beer. I'm so thirsty, says the Jew, I must have diabetes. Okay, many of you are laughing, but if I told this joke to a Japanese audience, there would be dead silence. First, we are not, thank you very much, cooperation. We are not familiar with those stereotypical images of each nation and of Jews. Second, the connection between diabetes and tea, wine and beer is beyond our imagination. Third, it is almost impossible for Japanese to grasp the complex psychology of Jewish humor as seen in diabetes. A similar complex psychology can be found in Woody Allen's Hannah and Her Sisters. Hannah's ex-husband, Mickey, is a hypochondriac who goes to his doctor complaining of hearing loss and is frightened by the possibility that he may have a fatal brain tumor. When tests prove that he is perfectly healthy, he is initially overjoyed, literally jumping in the street outside of a hospital. But then he worries that his life is meaningless. This Mickey-type character is a useful example to illustrate the background of the words, I'm so thirsty, I must have diabetes. But Eliezer explained Jewish humor as follows. It's a humor that's full of received slights and insults, imagined or real, anguish about identity, the fear of losing it, and the wish to lose it, and merge into the larger social mass. Jokes about the impossibility of assimilation, sexual innocence, making light of disastrous circumstances, end quote. As I have pointed out before, most Japanese have almost no experience of problems associated with assimilation. Therefore, we are not much concerned about our identities, simply because most of us know in which area of Japan our great-parents or even great-great-grandparents were born. Nobody asks your religious belief, because most of us accept the indigenous Shintoism as well as Buddhism as a part of Japanese culture, even though we are not highly conscious about our unique sense of religion. A further challenge we translators face is that Jewish humor has developed. Jewish humor of 20th century America is more difficult to identify and define than 19th century Jewish humor. As a result, the Jewish success in entering American society, Jewish ethnic identity becomes diluted. Jewishness varies widely and sharply. Jeremy Dauba, the professor of Yiddish language, literature, and culture at Columbia University, introduces a hilarious joke showing the diluted Jewish identity in his book, Jewish Comedy. Mrs. Cohen arrives on the boat from the old country and is met by her son. She barely recognizes him. "You've shaven your beard," she says. "Oh, Mama, in America, everyone is clean shaven." He says, She says, and he says, "Do you keep kosher? It's so hard to do that here." He replies, "So expensive and every penny counts." "And Sabbath?" she asks, hopefully. "With the competition so fierce, it simply has to be a severe 7-day work week," he says. She leans forward. "Tell me something, son," she asks. "Are you still circumcised?" Okay, Ruth Weiss says, "To us, it's a miracle if God does what the rabbi wants. To you, it's a miracle if the rabbi does what God wants." However, abroad or in Israel, declining Jewish literacy and observance left Jewish comic writers with less indigenous material to work with. In sharp contrast to Jewish society, Japanese society has been more stable and peaceful, far removed from anti-Semitism or the Holocaust. The Japanese society reflects the insularity of Japan. Japanese share with the Jews neither with their problems of identity nor the trauma of assimilation. Japanese also do not have the concept of one all-powerful God. Isaac Bashevis Singer explains his theory of a religion of protest in his novel, Meshuggah, English translation in 1994. "What I meant was that one may believe in God's wisdom and yet deny that He is a source of goodness only. God and mercy are not absolutely synonymous. Even so, we cannot ignore God any more than we can ignore time or space or causality." Japanese, however, do not share the idea of only one powerful God. Therefore, it is impossible for most Japanese to understand the expressions of trauma and anguish in the relationship between God and Jews found in Jewish literature, as often seen in the novels of Chaim Grade, Isaac Bashevis Singer, Elie Wiesel, and Philip Roth. These are some examples of enormous differences between Japanese and Jewish thinking that we faced as translators. My task from now on is to be a good link between Japanese and Jewish people. Fortunately, I could found the Jewish Literary Society of Japan 20 years ago, and now over 50 members are learning Yiddish literature and Jewish literature. I'm now teaching the Hebrew alphabet and Yiddish and Jewish literature to about 70 undergraduate students every year in my university, as well as several graduate students. In truth, I'm not really up to this task, as British poet William Wordsworth writes in his poem, "Plain living and high thinking." And in Yiddish proverb, next one please. Das Hatred is good, nor their cup is too plain. Okay, the hat is fine, but head is too small. But I'm enjoying myself too much to start. Thank you very much. I'm going to sit down.
So yeah, we have a few minutes for questions. Yes,
I have. So, to what extent have these expressions entered the Japanese vernacular?
In translation.
In so that you take an expression like kind of horror and the Japanese translation or the Japanese interpretation
Yes.
of it. Is that something?
Exactly
that-
same. For example, as for the Kenyo Hore, exactly same with the Kuwabara Kuwabara in Japanese. That exact cultural equivalent. See, so that easy to translate that, but not always. It works, So that we have to find some similar expressions in my language. See, to convey the nuance.
Right.
Okay, it's hard. I think it's hard, not only the English and Yiddish, but also any other languages. Same thing can be. Yes. Please.
You had spoken about how not many Japanese left the country. Isn't it true there are large expatriate communities in Brazil and South America of Japanese? In Sao Paulo, there's a huge Japanese community.
Yes.
As I just wondered about
Well,
that.
I don't know the exact figure right now, but yes, many people from southern part of Japan, they left Japan
For
for
economic
Brazil and so on. To make a living, because that time is very poor. That is 19th century.
So recent times Japanese do not they stay in Japan.
Yes, of course, except the business people, Yes.
I believe you said that the Japanese people really don't know anything about pogroms, etc. So I was wondering then how they accepted or understood the Fiddler story that deals with that. Can you hear me? You understand me? If the Japanese people did not know or learn about pogroms, I was wondering how they could accept and understand the Fiddler story.
Well, maybe the tragedy is not only the such a pogroms or Holocaust, but I think most Japanese are interested in the very close relationship between parents and children. That's more important for Japanese, and try to keep the tradition, Japanese tradition or our long tradition. I think most of Japanese can see that in that Fiddler on the Roof. Not exactly the pogrom. Yes, slightly different, Yes. Sorry?
So, when I've seen Kurosawa movies, I've always assumed it was Yiddish. A movie like Humor, where it's the same plot as the Woody Allen movie. It's the man discovers he's sick and what is he going to do with his life and denies whether it's meaningful. And it's funny and it's sad. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is if you don't have the experience of refugee life and of not having a homeland, I presume I've seen Tokyo Story. You've got mothers. What are the Japanese experiences that are especially easy to translate for Yiddish? Are there any?
Easy translation?
Yeah, are there
Equivalents.
like mothers or things that are generally sources of humor for Yiddish speakers? Are there things that are close to the Japanese experience that makes translation?
Well, some of them are very close, even though the experiences are slightly different, but still, as a human, we share the similarities, of course, but not in the same, situation. Like we have to often had, floods or earthquakes, and many people had to leave their houses and they lost their houses, quite recently, last year. In my hometown, in Okayama, that is in between Osaka and Hiroshima, that was flooded, quite heavily, and it's tragic. Still, 2,000 people are living in different places. It takes a long time, to recover that kind of thing. So that, not that's superficial differences, of course, but still, we still can share the tragedies, in different forms, in different cultures, in different countries. So that I think it makes it possible for us to sympathize or empathize with that. I think. Yes. Japanese lady.
Okay, Actually, about your question, I like to, put some
Yes.
additional, and I like to support with Dr. Hirose because I watch the movie, not Japanese, version and English, but they are not focused and they can understand. For example, like intermarriage. Did you remember that phrase, right? Intermarriage, and then also that scene, wedding, the night,
The dreams.
yes, right. So that that is keep and stay in the Japanese, Jewish culture. But Dr. Hirose mentioned we are look at family relationship, so that it's not to connect how was program, what was intermarriage, because if they don't know the Judaism, so just I like to he
Could you please
answered he answered right
Yes.
he answered rightly. Yeah, because they can't understand Jewish culture.
So there's a lot of nuance that's missing from the Japanese understanding.
I think
of
so.
the play.
Yeah.
And add something else.
Can I ask you?
Yes.
Yeah, do you have comedians in Japan?
Yes.
And what they talk about?
What they talk
What are
about?
the jokes about?
Well, it is well known that Japanese don't have any sense of humor. It is not true. This is not true. We have over 400 years of humorous history, so that from the Edo period, that is 17th century. But the expression is quite different. Storytelling and, modern days, nowadays, mostly we use the like a word play or pan, word pan. Yes, pans. Yeah, that's true. So simply because Japanese is the phonetic language,
Yes.
so that one word means several meanings. It has even one letter. See, and so if you put together two letters, create a lot of meanings, and three letters, 1,000 of them, so that we can make word pannings, out of that. For example, I have a very, very good example for that. For example, if I say I, that means love. A plus I is love, affection. See? So that keep this in mind. Okay? This is a very interesting one. Japanese riddle. Okay? When is a kiss only a KSS? When is a kiss only a KSS? So, of course, I is missing. Okay? I is missing. I is love. See? So that when it lacks love, see?
So the comedy is about riddles with the language.
Yes. Yes. But deeply
Too
related.
intellectual.
Well, yes, that's true. And if you don't cultural background or language background, it's hard to know, because oftentimes we refer to the classics and modern and using this word panning, and it makes and it creates a very, very deep love out of this. But it's hard for non-native speakers of Japanese, to imagine, because we're not educated in that sense, in Japanese classics, in Japanese.
So comics would not criticize like public figures.
Oh, sure, we
like
do,
the emperor or top public officials.
Oh, yes, sure.
Because so
We-
much of comedy here in America. is
Yes,
based-
we have a lot of common things with other languages. But one more little, I'd like to say, this is I think most of you understand. In what American state is it always morning? Can you guess? Yes, Ohio. Morning, that means in Japanese, Ohio means good morning. Yes. Excuse me, one more because I wouldn't say. You know? Okay. What American state frowns on love affairs? What American state frowns on love affairs?
Frowns on.
Okay, I can see your expectation. Georgia, because we can cut Joji. Joji means in Japanese like a love affairs. And Iya, Joji, Iya. Okay, Iya is no thanks. So Georgia is, that means in Japanese love affairs are disgusting. So something like that. So wordplay, you know? It's very easy to make this kind of jokes. Very light, but sometimes it's very hard because you have to go back to history. Sorry, kept you waiting.
I have a Jewish friend from New York
Yes?
who, when he was 7 years old, told his mother he had to learn Japanese, even though he had never been exposed to the Japanese culture or anything else. He said that he had to learn Japanese. His mother agreed to it and took private lessons, and later he became a Buddhist and a Zen priest. And when people asked him, how could that be when you didn't have any background or introduction to it from your family? And he said, I was a Buddhist priest in a past life in Japan.
Oh, I see. Reincarnation.
So my question to you is, were you Jewish in your last life?
That's a very, very good question. I have two daughters, you know. One is a medical doctor. The other one is a lawyer. I'm Jewish father. Yes, please.
Has there been a decline in Japanese culture with tradition or observance of religious customs as there has been in the Jewish faith?
Yes, we do. We do. So that not so religious. We don't have scriptures. I mean, we don't read the scriptures of Shintoism or Buddhism, but still, we just follow the customs and tradition. So last week is a memorial week for us. But, you know, I came here so that, well, I'm not a good boy. You know? But still, we try to keep that kind of a special week for most of the Japanese try to keep that. And we are very traditional, generally
But do the
speaking.
Japanese youth,
Mm-hmm.
the younger people?
Yes, even younger people, you know, they don't read the Bible, but still they go to shrine for some purposes, and they go to, you know, graveyard to pray for their deceased people, and something like that. They just follow that, you know, even though they are not religious, but part of a culture. That is a very special, you know, character of Japanese, I think.
Since the religion is so different in Japan, are there degrees of observance like we see in the Jewish world in America?
Well, maybe there are different opinions about that, but in my opinion, I think, you know, most of the Japanese, like 90%, not exactly religious in Judaism, Judaistic term, you know, but we follow the, as I told you, we follow the religious tradition. So that in that sense, we are religious. We never deny the meaning of the God, not God, single God, but gods or spirits, or, you know. So I think we are religious in many ways, but different types of religion, so that you may feel a bit difficult to understand that. But this is from now on, that's my philosophy. But even Judaism started maybe from a polytheism, not monotheism. Like a Greek, you know, in a Greek, there are a lot of gods. See? That's a world which we share in Japan. So that, you know, maybe similar here. For example, if you go back to the Bible story, Jacob's story, you know, Jacob's second wife, Rachel, you know, she still, when she left his home, you know, she still such a statue of his father, and that's very important symbol for the religion. So that means, idol. And in other words, that's an idol. So even a Rachel, or Rachel's family, believed in that kind of different type of religion. So that I think that's a very quite natural starting points of religion. Every religion may be something like that. And later, we make much of the mainstream and try to exclude those different elements. So that the Bible itself, I'm not a rabbi, and so that I can say here in synagogue, but still, different elements are mixed in the Bible. That's my understanding, but maybe wrong.
One last
See,
question.
what about guilt?
I just.
I'm just wondering if my knowledge of Buddhism
Yes.
is not Japanese but Chinese through reading a lot of
Oh, I see.
Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
But I know in her books they talk about something similar to the evil eye in Yiddish, which is you don't say it around the gods. And I know a lot of Jewish humor, and Yiddish is about saying something bad when something good happens because you don't want to tempt the evil
Yes.
eye or t-t-t. And I wonder if that translates, is there the concept of the evil eyes, I guess it would be, because there are multiple gods. Is there humor that derives from saying something bad because you don't want the evil eye to get you in Japan?
Yes, that's true. And if you say in Hore, in Yiddish, or maybe in Hebrew too, but that's hard to translate into Japanese. Once when you come across for the first time, what does it mean? But if you think about the meaning of a deep meaning of that, I think every culture finds some similarity with that kind of concept. Yes, because we are not always happy. We are not always fortunate. So that you may find some cause for it. See? So that I think that's similar aspects of every religion. So that it's possible to translate that. See? But there are some concepts which are very, very hard to translate. As I told you in my lecture, that is a concept of God, singular God. That's the hardest one to translate for the Japanese, That's very, very hard, in fact. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, really? Sorry.
Yoshi, you said that there was a concentration of humor in Osaka,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, yes.
Can you speak about that?
Okay. Well, as I told you, Japanese are not good at making a humor or humorless nation. But Osaka, the people in Osaka, they're quite different. They're Jewish origin. Yes, exactly like our Jewish people. If you visit Japan, please go to Osaka instead of Tokyo, Kyoto. Same with Rome and Italy, so that go to Osaka and observe.
What's the difference?
That's
Yeah,
where
Osaka.
What's the
That's where it
difference?
ignites.
Well, just like a Jewish
They like food.
humor, they have exactly. I don't need to explain about that. When I moved from Tokyo to Osaka for the first time on the train, I listened to their communication. See, two people communicate to each other, speaking to each other, and the one tried to be a fool, stupid person, and the other one tried to, criticize. I looked upon that, upon him, but still that creates a very, very interesting situation. Even the professional comedians do that. We say that in Japanese, boke and tsukomi, in Japanese, and so that Japanese people know that. Tokyo people don't do that. A bit snobbish, What are you talking about? Such a foolish thing, You're my sugar? Yeah. Something like that. In Osaka, you should be Michigan. See, otherwise you cannot get better communication with Osaka people. See? So I really enjoy that communication, kind of a Jewish type of communication. So, you know, Jewish, as a character of Jewish humor is like a self-mockery. See? Exactly like that. See, that you can find in Osaka. So please study first Japanese and enjoy it there in Osaka, in Jewish humor in Japanese. Yes?
When Father Patrick Dubois conducts research on the Eastern European Catholics who were very guilty of genocide against the Jews during the Holocaust, he's looked upon as a curiosity, especially by the Jewish community, that it's rather interesting that a Catholic priest is looking into Catholics' misbehaviors. When people talk about you, and I'm not disclosing any secrets here, there is a prejudicial bias. If you were from Eastern Europe and a member of the Catholic Church, they would say, well, he's interested in Yiddish culture and Yiddish language. How do you respond to that prejudice, whether it comes from, well, from whomever, from Americans, Japanese, Jews, whatever, when they say, you're studying what? Which means it's not just a curiosity. It goes beyond that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It really is bad taste.
Yes.
I know you're very polite, and I know that you respond to people like that, and I respect your answer. But I'd like to hear how you deal with that.
Right. In Japan, when I am asked, what do you do? What do you teach? When I say Yiddish and Yiddish literature, so that most of the Japanese think Irish literature. Sounds like Irish literature. Oh, that's cool. No, very traditional Irish literature instead of Yiddish literature. So sounds like, Irish, So that's no problem, I don't need to explain further. In my country, no one expects a Yiddish. What is that? I've never eaten that. What kind of question?
I have a question now. So what made you decide to study something like this? Why did you go into it?
Yeah, Isaac Bashvisinger, yes.
You told that in the
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Isaac Bashvisinger. When I was 22 years old, I encountered Isaac Singer's work in English translation. That's the beginning. Yes.
I think we need to stop, and if you have more questions, please feel free, but in there, yeah? Because we'll have to leave there in 20 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.